Once was pro strongman Bobby Thompson, and it's good to be back. Welcome to Off the Bar. Let's talk about deadlifting, of course. First things first, I've been deadlifting 900 pounds for over 6, almost 7 years, probably closer to 7 than 6 at this point. And I want to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. And first off, no surgeries. And I've actually never hurt myself while deadlifting, with the exception of a fractured rib, which is kind of substantial, but that was a freak incident that probably will never occur again, and most people aren't going to have to deal with. But the constant goods and the constant bads. Well, I'm going to lead with the bads and just get things knocked out. I've actually got some notes here, so I'm going to be looking down at them. So first things first, like I said, I've been deadlifting over 900 pounds for most of 6, getting close to 7 years now. To include things like I've done a 915 triple. I pulled many years ago, probably about 4 years ago, I pulled 1,000 to just below my knee without a suit on. I've pulled 1,000, over 1,000 twice without a suit and no belt. I've done multiple beltless deadlifts over 900 pounds, topping out on a standard barbell, standard plates at 950 beltless. And I've also pulled a 964 or 965 on a standard barbell, standard plates with belt, no hitch. So I'm a relatively decent deadlifter, and over the years, it's done some very positive and some very negative things for me. The very negative, I have to say, is my hearing, which is coming back. That's great. However, years of deadlifting, and essentially what I theorize has been pulling my body into just kind of like a hyper flexed position, kind of like with my upper back. So the thoracic region of my spine is just like weighed over and down. I think that's put a lot of pressure on like the suboccipital muscles of kind of like my neck, and that's pulled down on those muscles, which is interfering with my traps and my hearing. Ultimately, I think it's just pulling some tubes tight and fluid's not transferring when it should be. So every time I lay down, it's like I'm laying my head underwater. It's just a matter of how deep I'm going every time I'm doing it. That's not as bad of a thing, but it is pretty chronic. And usually with that, for a long time, I suffered from chronic migraines and headaches just from the pressure and how tight and overdrawn my traps were. And it had gotten to a point that the answer was, okay, well, we make your back stronger, your serratus anterior, your rhomboids, your lats, your lower traps, your mid trap. The problem was competing in strongman like I was and deadlifting like I was, everything that I was doing other than my back day, even existing, sitting and working, was contributing to that forward problem because gravity wants to already drag us forward. So there really was no amount of work I could do to prevent this problem from occurring. I just had to begin to build my body around the problem, which not a great time. So there was that. My hearing has been kind of an issue. My back, actually, believe it or not, does not hurt, but I do have issues with my core. My core is, I would say, almost chronically braced. I am blowing pressure into my abdomen, so to speak, and kind of filling out my belly, just standing and not thinking about it. And that has led to some gut distension. And honestly, I eat a lot of food, and I have for a long time, so that's probably fed into that. But with that kind of constant tension in my stomach, it has done some weird things to my QLs. They don't so much hurt, but they'll become sensitive and tight, and I will get like a lower back cramp every now and then. And it does kind of give me some like interior pelvic tilt, and I have to kind of adjust that when I'm standing. Those are the long-term negatives, but again, no low back pain. I've had a MRI done over the past couple years, and there was nothing extreme to show. I've had some x-rays done, and my spine looked pretty solid, actually. Nothing we were really too concerned about, and I did compete for a couple more years after that, but I if anything, my back's healthier now than it ever has been. So big bonuses. Now, let's talk about the positives. My ability to brace for impact is insane. And what I mean by that is if I see somebody coming towards me or a thing coming towards me, or if I am bracing against a reactive modality, like if I'm hanging a band from myself and a weight is kind of bouncing on the band, it's catching and jolting my body, my ability to brace against those forces is really, really impressive. And I have an abnormally strong core. However, it is so strong that it's almost strong to a sport-specific point where it's under-effective in other points that really have to remind me to not clench my butt cheeks. So it's really good, not bad, but there's definitely some kind of neutral negatives that have come with the positives. But I have a bulletproof brace. I'm also built like a gorilla. And what I mean by that is I have upper back development that only comes from years of carrying and picking very, very heavy things up. And when you to do something like that for years and years and years and not suffer any major setbacks. Now, there have been times where I wasn't able to deadlift as much as if I were peaked, but I changed my deadlift form, I would say 4 to 5 major times over the last 4 to 5 years. And every time I've done it, it's elicited a positive response, never a negative. It was only when I did the same thing for too long that I started to see the negatives. So you do have to constantly be evolving. But with that being said, the stronger and stronger I got and the longer I trained, my ability to do something different and see positives in it and get positives from it also began to expand. So it was almost like I got to be less picky with my accessory work, but I had to be pickier with the frequency of which I did it. But what I did seemed to matter less and less. At the end of the day, I had worked myself into a position to where I was more or less practicing my deadlift and then crushing other, supplemental sorry, Steve. Sorry, guys, it's Steve the Gnome. Or I was crushing other supplemental exercises and hitting PRs and things like, I call it my standing Romanian, which is basically a good morning in your deadlift position and you don't remove the flexion from your knees. You kind of like bend them and establish, and then you maintain your deadlift brace. Or like I'm PRing my seated zombie pin squat at 90 degrees against bands, right? Like it's PRing those things that's leading to the heavier deadlift. But that also, because I deadlift so well, toot my own horn a little bit, I'm actually pretty good at it. I can deadlift less, not frequency, but less intensity, which puts me at less sports related risk. So big bonus there. Now, while we're on the topic of deadlifting, before anybody says his name, Colton Engelbrecht. Sorry if I mispronounced your last name, man. I don't think I can physically pronounce it correctly if I didn't. Strongest powerlifter of all time. No questions asked. That's the guy. That's him. Best powerlifter of all time? It's a little difficult. Now, Colton's been around for a very, very long time. I would like to see him around a little bit longer before we give him the best of all time, which in my opinion, the best of all time is Ed Cohen. Not the strongest of all time. I feel Colton is stronger than Ed. Stronger than Ed was. I think Ed would agree with that Ed at Ed's peak and Colton at Colton's peak, it's just kind of there at this point. However, I think what separates them is Ed had some longevity, and also Colton's career time frame could pass Ed's, but Ed knew less and had less to work with. So I think we have to remember the balance there. So Colton on the way to being the greatest, not quite in my opinion. And by the way, greatest powerlifter of all time, that's where what I'm referring to. I think he's arguably the second, if not the best deadlifter of all time. Thor Bjornsson's the strongest of all time, deadlift of all time, but I think Eddie is somewhere amongst the best, just because the 500 kilo barrier being broken has done more, I think, than the people who have broke it. Or not being broken, but the 500 kilo barrier being kind of like set by Eddie, and then, I'm gonna pull 500. We know we can do this. So I think that was probably it's kind of the greatest deadlift moment of all time currently, just because it was such a big jump. And now by comparison of Eddie's record, everybody's nickel and diming it, which by the way, I keep doing it. I'm not worried about that at all. But that's just my thoughts on the topic. So we can't forget that. Oh goodness gracious. Sorry guys. I got to look at my notes. And then we got to talk about like strongman fans and powerlifting fans. So you guys need to get together, okay, and have this conversation, because being strong and being good at a sport are not the same thing. However, being good at a sport can make you strong, and we can use sports to measure strength. But we need to start having the very critical conversations. For instance, I don't think Colton Engelbrecht could load a 400-pound Atlas stone right now. I know I sure as hell can, or probably couldn't for quite some time now, but can't now anyways. But I think he has more potential to learn how to do that than the majority of the top strongmen competing right now in the open class have an opportunity about deadlifting him. So that's kind of my thing, where I simply don't think a lot of those guys could get that strong, but I think Colton could learn to pick up an Atlas stone. Like, would he be the top 10 in the world, not in the open class, maybe in the U20, U125, like PSL's trying to promote. That'd be really cool to have them come over there. By the way, if we give you an official invite, Colton, I promise it will be more than a month in advance. Not saying I can't give you an invite, but I'll chirp your name in. I'll see who I can ask about that. I got the phone call to make, Colton, if you're interested, but it's not a Giants Live quite level production yet, but we do a pretty good job. And like I said, we'll, if we could extend you an invite, it's not we, it's somebody else I'm pretty sure they would do it, more than a month out. But like I said, I don't make those decisions, but I can mention it to somebody and somebody else can say no. I'm not saying yes, I'm not saying no, but I'm saying I can ask the person that can. So I'm out of trouble there. Sorry, Tyler. That being said, where does that leave us? Where does that leave us? Oh, already talked about the best, already talked about what I'm doing. I am currently trying to be the first man to deadlift 1,000 pounds beltless. It has not been done. It hasn't been. There's rumors and videos out there, and the most controversial thing I've seen was Eddie pulled a very, very high, his highest videoed 900 plus pound beltless lift is higher than mine. He's got it. I think his was like 980 or something like that. But then it came back and said, well, we actually weighed the plates and it came out over 1,000 pounds. Here's my thing. If you didn't make sure they weighed your world record plates, I don't care if they're calibrated or not, it was a world record at a contest, not an exhibition. That was a contest. If the plates didn't get weighed there, I don't think we should expect a gym, not a random gym, I'm sure it's well known, I just don't remember the name of it, but I don't think we should expect a civilian gym, whatever you want to call it, of any variety. Oh, well, we weighed the plates out, but Ed, you didn't have them do that at your arguably the greatest moment in your strength career. So, like I said, 1,000 pounds beltless as of right now has never been done before.